Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for July 19th, 2021. I'm going to focus today on the insane coverage of the flooding that's going on in Western Germany. As you may know, the Schiller Institute is sponsoring a conference this Saturday, July 24th, an online conference on the topic, There is no climate emergency, in which we will have some actual scientists, people knowledgeable about infrastructure, energy, and so on, as well as the cosmic effects from solar radiation, the atmospheric effects, to take a look at the real issues that are being covered up by the hysteria around climate, which dominates virtually every country's major media, the universities, the think tanks, the political networks, and so on. So you can register for this at theschillerinstitute.com. It will be a conference this Saturday, which is absolutely timely given the way the issue of the German floods has been covered. Now, what's happening is that the flooding is being used to push ahead the whole question of the green policy. The New York Times, for example, had an article today, German floods, climate change moves to center of the campaign as the toll mounts. It's being used to push the candidacy of the green candidate for chancellor, Annalena Baerbock, who has no solution to anything but the typical greenie attack on modern science, on infrastructure, on energy, efficient energy sources, and so on. The push for this is to make sure that the trend in Germany, which is to less energy flux dense systems, continues and escalates. There's an exit from coal, an exit from nuclear. There's an attempt to shut down fossil fuel use, transform the auto sector into basically plug-in rickshaws. You know, the whole policy is crazy. It's not based on science, it's based on ideology. And this has to be exposed because otherwise we're going to be locked into systems that will lead to massive depopulation as the ability to feed a population is lost with the moves toward subsistence agriculture and so on. Now, in contrast to the New York Times coverage, there's an article in our German paper, Neue Solidarität, which talks about the fact that there have been much worse floods in Germany before. One case was the 1342 flood, which killed thousands of people, and there were much lower CO2 levels then. Also in 2002, the Elbe River overflowed, with causing enormous damage, lives lost, and so on. Now, what the Neue Solidarität article says is the following. Whether such natural events, which are always to be expected, turn into catastrophes, depends above all on whether people have created the necessary infrastructure in time to enable them to cope with them. We do not need a vague climate protection, but concrete measures to protect people. Now, the problem in Germany has been significant underinvestment in upgrading existing infrastructure and building new infrastructure, the so-called Black Zero policy. You know, the German government is so proud of their budget surplus, but perhaps spending some of that budget surplus or generating even more beyond that in new credit would have saved lives and would have saved the catastrophic loss of businesses, housing, and so on. The rivers which flooded were tributaries of the Rhine-Meuse river systems. These tributaries have had no dredging, no new canal projects, and no maintenance on the dams that serve the area. So the result is you have flooding. Well, this is what should be known. You have Merkel now wringing her hands, talking about the need to take an escalated approach to dealing with the climate problem. But she's not talking about improvements in flood control, not talking about improvements in water management. Instead, banning efficient energy systems supposedly to reduce the carbon dioxide level, to reduce global climate change, to protect the people. This is known as insanity. And this is the problem that affects all Western thinkers on this issue. Look at the situation, for example, in the Western United States. A drought's been going on for 25 years, but we knew long before this that the water supplies in the West were limited. That is, the existing water supplies. So in the late 60s, or late 50s rather, a proposal called NOWAPA was developed, the North American Water and Power Alliance, which would have at the time cost several billions of dollars to divert water from northwest Canada and Alaska, which otherwise runs off into the Gulf of Alaska. Instead, divert it through an area called the Rocky Mountain Trench to replenish the river systems from Washington, Oregon, Northern California, into Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, and so on. Even water that could have gone to the Rio Grande on the border of Texas and Mexico. This was supported by President Kennedy. Robert Kennedy included it in his 1968 campaign. Had we invested in this at the time, we would have the system now. Instead, we're seeing drought that's ravaging these states. And at the same time, because so much of the electricity is hydroelectric, and that so much has been shut down with nuclear plants being closed, with the deregulation policy, with the solar and wind to replace it, you have blackouts going on in all Western states, and it's likely to get worse. Similarly, in Texas, we had the winter freeze that killed people this last winter. Now in the summer with heat, there's the danger of conserving energy, which means people are not going to have air conditioning. Systems may shut down. This is the world we're entering because of the idiocy when it comes to two things. One is the so-called climate change theory. And secondly, is the failure to invest in new systems, which include water management, but also development of nuclear fusion. The anti-nuclear movement has severely damaged Western nations. Now, this is not universal. The governments of Russia, of China, a number of African countries are now going nuclear, including small nuclear modular reactors. The ITER project, the nuclear fusion project in Europe, the Chinese, the Japanese are all investing heavily in fusion. There's even some investment in the United States in this, though not nearly enough. So we have catastrophes that are 25, 30, 40 years in the making, which are then added to by the nonsense in the economic policy realm, where the idea of spending on infrastructure is government waste. It's big government. Well, private investors are not going to invest in the kinds of projects like the Tennessee Valley Authority, the Hoover Dam, the big projects which are necessary. They're not going to do it because they can't make a return. How do you get a return on infrastructure? You increase the overall productivity of the system. That's how we used to think. That's how Alexander Hamilton crafted the ideas in the early period of American history, where we invested in infrastructure, in roads and ports and canals and bridges. What Lincoln did with the transcontinental railroad system, which enabled us to increase productivity by increasing the efficiency of energy, the efficiency of transportation, which then affects every aspect of an economy, as opposed to sitting there saying, well, we're producing too much carbon dioxide, therefore we have to cut back, and if people have to suffer, so be it. The idea that you're not going to have a hamburger in the future unless you're a very wealthy speculator. And the infrastructure bill that's coming through the Congress has no money for this. It's another fraud. It's a green financial bubble. That's the other side of this. Why they say there's no money to invest in real infrastructure. The funds are going into a carbon bubble, which is being managed by the former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, and Larry Fink and his BlackRock central bankers. They're going to take the money. It's not going to go to infrastructure. It's going to go into the speculative stock market, the bond markets, the derivatives, the mortgage-backed securities, and so on. So let's learn a lesson from the German floods. Invest in infrastructure. The one place in Europe which invested in infrastructure was the Netherlands. And so far, despite similar flooding to what we saw in, not similar, but similar amounts of rain that hit Germany, there's not been a single death in the Netherlands. So sign up for the Schiller Institute conference for this Saturday. And by the way, we need these videos to get out as widely as possible. Subscribe to our website, the LaRouche Organization. Get your friends to subscribe. Help us make these ideas circulate at the higher level so that we can begin to influence policy changes in the country. We're already doing that, but we need more. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you again tomorrow.